Good evening and welcome to the Death Cafe. One of the reasons I love doing a live video like this is that people are coming in from all over the country, sometimes all over the world. So as you start to come into the Death Cafe, let us know where you're from. Grab yourself a cuppa. I'm having some nice fresh coconut water tonight, and make yourself comfortable and welcome to the cafe. Snuggle on in and we'll get started in just a minute. And when you come to the cafe, let me know if this is your first time at a cafe or have you been to a death cafe before. The other thing that I want to share with you on this live format for the Death Cafe, you can type in your questions or comments or concerns and I'll get to them. Hi, Lynn. Oh, you're from Canada. Welcome. Lovely to have you here tonight. Beautiful. So let me know where you're from and what brought you to the cafe, and we'll continue to have a dialogue. It's a funny format for me to have a live format. I can't see you. I know you can see me, but I want to see you. So the next best thing is to hear from you in the feed. While people are gathering, let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Andrea Dearhart, and I have the profound honor of being the founder of The Heartway, a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to serving those before, during, and after death and their loved ones. We provide advocacy and counseling, end-of-life care, education, and some ministry. And one of the most very important parts of this evening of the Death Cafe is it expands upon something that's really important to me, and that's simply having the conversation. Simply having the conversation. And that's what tonight is all about. It's about you and your questions and the conversation. Hi, Susan from Maryland. Nice to have you. And Becky, nice to have you from Kalamazoo, Michigan. So we're all over the country and in Canada thus far. That's just really lovely. How about we take a moment to ground ourselves and come together, just a breath. And I don't know what your day has been like, but we can let it go and come together. And I do want to say one other thing is that I have been an end-of-life practitioner for decades, and I'm happy to share any information with you tonight to support you, your loved ones, your clients, your patients. Anyway, this is a platform for you. So if you're feeling the space for this, go ahead and close your eyes and just make a connection to yourself. Where you're sitting, your feet are on the ground or crossed underneath you, or you're lying down. You can be doing anything. Just take note and make connection with your body. Then guide yourself to your breath, allowing your breath to begin to make the rhythm. Connect to the in-breath and the out-breath, and allow each breath to take you deeper than before. Gently and deliberately bringing your awareness throughout your body. Do a little bit of a scan and just take note of any part of your body that's speaking to you. Maybe there's some holding, control, tension, or pain. Just bring your breath to this space, this place within your body, and allow your breath to soothe this area. The greatest opportunity to let it go. Connect with your airflow, with the sensations of your body, sounds like my voice, temperature, textures. Create a gentle, non-judgmental, and grateful atmosphere within yourself. And may you be open to the roots of the unexamined assumptions and beliefs and remain open to all possibilities. From my heart to yours. And when it feels right, go ahead and allow your eyes to open up. How many of you are first time to the Death Cafe? I think I see a couple new names. I want to spend just a moment introducing what the Death Cafe is so that you're familiar with it, just in case this is your first time. Death Cafe events like we're having tonight is always offered on a nonprofit basis. It was started, the Death Cafe was started as a movement, and it's also a gathering like we're having this evening that occurs part of that movement. So it's intertwined. It began in Switzerland when Bernard Kreitz held his first Café Morto in 2004. Later, a British web designer, John Underwood, was inspired to host a Death Cafe gathering in his home in London in 2011. Today, we have over 13,000 Death Cafes in 80 countries. So people like us are gathering all over the world. It's quite incredible. I've had the profound honor of facilitating Death Cafes for almost 10 years now, all throughout California, via technology reaching all over the world. And it's just amazing and wonderful to be connected, hear our thoughts, our hearts, our stories, because we always end deeper than before. Most important is the atmosphere is accessible, respectful, and confident, a confidential space. There's no intention of any leading, selling any products, or any course of action. And if we were together, I would serve you chocolate and something refreshing to drink. So feel free to take the best care of you. The overall objective of the Death Cafe is to increase awareness of death with the view of helping people make the most out of their finite life. I always say death inspires life. And when we accept our finite life, we just live more fully. We start to discard the external roles and petty concerns that basically end up feeling meaningless to us, thus allowing the space and the incentive to focus on what is truly important and meaningful. People choose to take part of the Death Cafe for so many reasons, like I'm curious what brought you here tonight. But it's worth noting that the Death Cafe movement has arisen spontaneously, appearing to meet a felt need and demonstrate at least some people in our society and elsewhere are willing to talk openly about death-related topics. I just want to add a couple more things. It's not intended to be a group, a grief support group, a lecture, or an educational session. However, we always feel supported at the end. We always gain knowledge. It's really about having that space to communicate end-of-life issues and your concerns. We cannot make death rationally disappear from our lives, nor can we completely erase the sadness and other forms of distress associated with death-related issues. However, we can talk about death, share insights and attitudes, and learn from each other, and strive to cope more effectively with dying, death, and bereavement. I hope you have a sweet evening tonight, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you at least a little bit through our conversation. So now is the time for you to write in the chat box any questions or comments, or I always like to start with a gentle invitation by asking, what brought you here tonight? Something, because I know there's a lot of things you could do besides going to a Death Cafe this evening. And we're sure glad you're here with us. Well, you're gathering your thoughts, and I really want to hear from you, because that's really what the Death Cafe is about. But I had an interesting circumstance this week that ended up being a profound ethical dilemma. I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Hi, Maria. It's just popped in from British Columbia, Sunshine Coast, Lovely to have you here tonight. I love that we have Canadians here tonight. um, and this was the situation. It's a beautiful family I'm working with, and they're sisters. And one of the sisters has a end of life. Is at her end of life. She's got multiple myeloma, and she's in her 80s. She's had 2 bad falls and just recently broke her hip. A consequence of her treatment has created some cognitive challenges. So she's not always able to make sound decisions for herself. And that's an important key to recognize. Her sister is her durable power of attorney for healthcare. And she's so blessed. Her sister is just absolutely exquisite and is doing everything to do the right thing. The challenge is that the client, who is at the end of her life, keeps going back and forth on, I'm ready to stop treatment. No, I want to continue treatment. I don't want to do this anymore. Yes, I want to do this. And for the sister, it's so hard to know. She wants to honor her wishes completely. But after she says, I'm ready to end life, she'll end up having an incredible few weeks of without pain, doing things she loves. I think she likes to go out for oysters and go to the market with her caregiver. So she has a pretty good quality of life. And I think quality of life is a helpful indicator in these situations. A little backstory that's sweet is these sisters' mother was a client of mine 15 years ago. And it was like pretty incredible that she reached back out after all these years. So, Lynn, I'll get right to your question when I finish this little vignette. And so the question, the ethical dilemma that comes up is, how do we decide, let alone for ourselves, but for those we're caring for, what quality of life is and when that moment is when life is not worth living? It's a beautiful, powerful, and maybe difficult contemplation, but one that will help us. Love to hear if you have any comments and what you think would be the best choice right now. And I'll share with you in a minute what where we are in the journey with this. So Lynn had a question or comment. I want to be able to respond to it. Lynn's sharing, she's here because I'm increasingly being led to working with end-of-life care. Lovely. It seems that things keep showing up for me, such as this event on social media, and I'm following all the breadcrumbs, and I'm continually in awe of what unfolds. Beautifully. Beautiful, Lynn. Thank you for sharing that. There's an amazingly increase of people that are being called to this work. One of the beauties of this, it is so necessary. We are an aging population, and by the year 2030, we'll have more elders than youth in at least the United States and many other countries. I think Canada is pretty similar. And we need people to care for each other. The current medical system would not be able to handle it. So we need to create some changes. And working in end-of-life care gives that opportunity to expand it. We're launching an end-of-life practitioner training program in September. Lynn, you're welcome to check it out and ask any questions. But the program is designed and intended to be an integrative care model to work with the medical model of care and a psycho-spiritual model to expand the services for end-of-life. As we continue to struggle in our healthcare systems and more services are being taken away from us, which I'm pretty sure you might have an experience of, our needs as clients, our needs as patients aren't being per se met. So what do? Currently, in the end-of-life environment, there's lots of opportunities for increasing care and support services. One of our modules in this program is about that. And learning how to expand the services in hospice, for example. Hospice workers often don't have a lot of time to help sit down with the family and help them create a death plan or help them work through the fear of death. Lots and lots of avenues. So there's beautiful opportunities, Lynn, and I wish you well on that. In any way I can help you as you're down that rabbit hole or picking up breadcrumbs, just let me know. Becky shares, you're referring to the client I talked about, that's a tough situation for my client and her sister. I wonder if when your client makes the decision to end life, some burden and stress is lifted and her body responds by giving her those good days that follows. That's an interesting contemplation. I think that's a possibility. The challenge with this particular client is she's in and out of cognitive presence. And she's not necessarily being able to report what her reality is. For example, I did a little pain scale with her the other day. I asked her on scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the worst pain that you've experienced. By the way, I was in a hospital once and I saw a sign in the hospital room with the pain scale on it. Usually they have the faces and they have different colors from yellow to green to red. And 1 being the most comfortable, 10 being the worst. And the sign said for a 10, you feel like you're being hit by a train at the same time eaten by a shark. And I went, okay, that would be a pain level 10. I'd never seen anything like that before. It was quite incredible. But this client wasn't able to report pain. She reported a pain level 7 to me. I was on a Zoom call with her. She's a client a little farther away from me. I do get to see her about every month, but we do Zoom sessions in between. And when I hung up, the caregiver called and reported she was walking around pain-free. So your question inspires, is our pain psychologically created? Is it physically created? Is it spiritually created? And I believe the answer is yes, yes, yes. Sometimes it's hard to decipher. Sometimes all 3 are happening at the same time. So one of the things as an end-of-life practitioner, we're trained to take that step back and analyze what's being presented, working on avoiding our judgments, listening to them and working with them, and seeing how we can meet the client where she's at. She gets confused and she may not be ready to end her life, but she's reporting that. So mostly what I do in situations like that is truly listen, truly hear, truly provide compassion and understanding and tools to help through the anxiety or tension. I think that's the most we can really do, because there is no right answer. There is no one answer. We're very much a complex of experiences. Our goal, just like with the Death Cafe, is to support people where they're at and help them make the most of their finite life. As people ask me, or say to me, I don't want to talk about death, I say, great, I really want to talk about how you want to live until you die. Life is a process, dying is a process, and death is an event. But we live until we take our last breath. I hope that's a little helpful, Becky, and love to hear any more. Wonderful, Lynn, you're going to start volunteering at a hospice in Canada. That's awesome. That's a great place to start to get experience. In fact, I started as a hospice volunteer, I have to say 50 years ago, 35 years ago. And I have such a love and connection and love working closely with hospice, because I think that's where we all win, is creating an integrative model of care at the end of life, taking the best of both services, taking the best tools and sharing them with those in need. So thank you and congratulations, Lynn. Maria, I'm here as an end-of-life doula trainee. Lovely. I love to engage in death positive conversations, and I'm considering starting a death cafe in my small community. Lovely. I had one of my students this morning asked how I would feel about her doing a death cafe in an area I'm doing one, and it's like, great. The more the merrier. The more the merrier. And I have to be honest, Maria, I love having conversations about death, whether they're positive or not, because they all the conversations have an opportunity for our transformation, for our healing, for our understanding, and for our depth. There are so many traditions, so many beliefs, so many practices in this pluralistic world that we have, from cultures and religions all over. And death is seen and visualized and experienced in as many ways. And I asked, is there a right way that we should feel? Should we be positive in death? I don't know. I think all possibilities are out there. I love having the conversations. And there is an opportunity to help people transform their fear and utilize their fears as an inspiration, utilizing their fears to go deeper and help support people in letting go of their fears so they can live more until it's time to die. We are in a culture that inspires fear of death and denial of death. I've mentioned that before on the cafe. We've got a culture's main myth in the United States that's anti-aging. How can you die when you're not permitted to age? So the conversations around aging and death really inspire us to face our fears. Death Cafe is a great opportunity for that. And we just started a few months ago a book club. It's called Into the Mystic, a deep dive. And all the books, yes, you got it, are on death and dying. Sometimes it's fiction, sometimes it's nonfiction. We'll be adding films. And it's been a lovely group. And they kind of validate my hypothesis. They're talking about death. We're going deep into small group work. There's contemplations that they get every week on the book, and we're taking one book and dissecting it in several weeks. So we have that time to process and go a little deeper. And last night was the ending of one of our book clubs. We did the book I'll share with you just in case you're interested. Ivan Ilyak's The Death of Ivan Ilyak by Leo Tolstoy. If you haven't read it, especially my doulas and inspiring doulas, I really encourage you to read this book. It's so beautifully written and gives us many, many perspectives of the dying process, the medical systems that support us, and the family's responses to end of life. It's quite illuminating. So all of that helps us deepen and, bottom line, face our mortality, face our life, our infinite life. We live as if we don't most of the time. So thank you. These are great questions. I hope the comments are supportive, and feel free to keep chiming in with me. Susan, I'm here to become more comfortable with death and talking about it so I can live life more fully. Beautiful, Susan. I sure hope this platform helps you. And if it feels right and you're comfortable, share with us a little bit more about what you're not comfortable about death. Is there fear for you? Is there curiosity? Have you not been around it? I'm not so sure. But what I can say is one of the ways to become more comfortable, one of the ways to weave death into our life is by doing just what you're doing. Coming to a death cafe, reading a book, and being in conversations with your loved ones. How do they feel about it? There's something beautiful when we connect on that bridge. And death is one of those bridges for us because we're all going to die. Every single one of us share that in common. We may die differently in different places in our lives, but every single one of us are going to have this human experience. Kind of fascinating. So I hope this is helpful for you. Please let us know a little bit more if you're willing. And you always have opportunities, by the way, always to reach out to the Heartway if we can be of support in any way. So Becky, Becky sharing, oh yes, the cognitive shifts in your client do add more ethical complications to the situation. Does this happen often with clients with dementia and Alzheimer's? Thank you, Becky. That's a great question. And it is an ethical complication because someone's life ends up being in the hands of someone else. I have been the DPOA for several people. Of late was my mother and sister. And my sister was the more complicated one with ethical dilemmas left and right. She died of end-stage breast cancer with brain mets. And when she had the brain mets, she lost her cognitive ability to make any type of decisions. She ended up with such a blessing. She ended up in a cognitive state that was childlike. In other words, she had the wonder and awe and always had a sweet smile on her face, which was such a relief because she was a person that had a lot of anxiety, and that was all gone. That was a blessing beyond words. When we discovered the METs, we did an MRI of the brain, and I spoke with her oncologist, and her oncologist said, okay, she has innumerable METs to the brain, which means more metastases to the brain than you possibly can count. And then there were 3 or 4 large ones in various places in the brain. One was the frontal lobe, and that put her in this particular state of consciousness where she wasn't analyzing and worrying and wasn't able to make decisions. That's the part of the brain that develops in our 20s still, early 20s. That's why when we're adolescents, we don't necessarily make the best judgment calls. And her doctor said, well, we're going to do full brain radiation. It took my breath away. If you're around, I don't want full brain radiation, pretty please. It's okay for me to die. And I wouldn't have made that choice. I wouldn't have made that choice for her. But I knew she would have wanted it. So I let them do brain radiation, and 3 or 4 days later, she started to decompose. She became incontinent. She couldn't drink from a straw. She couldn't feed herself. We ended up 911ing her because she had a UTI. I was a little suspicious of that. And then the doctor came in and said, okay, we can do this, 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 and this. And I said to her that it's time to let go, because I feel my sister would not want to be in this state of existence. I want to take her home so her young children can be with her. Everybody can say goodbye, and I want to love her through with the best of my ability. So that was an ethical decision. I was lucky. I knew her well. I had conversations. I knew she would have wanted radiation, and I knew she wouldn't have wanted in this cognitive state for a long period of time. So it gave me the courage to make that decision. With Alzheimer's and dementia, we kind of hope that we have these conversations before Alzheimer's and dementia. Otherwise, the loved one or the durable power of attorney, which isn't necessarily the loved one, has to make the decision as well. Maybe that's going to come to a point where they're going to want to stop treatment. Maybe not. If we don't have an understanding, if we haven't spent the time sharing our thoughts, our wishes, our beliefs, then it's up to the durable power of attorney to take that responsibility and make that decision. It's a lot of pressure, especially if it's a loved one, and especially if you don't know. The beauty in it is it becomes an opportunity for a deep conversation. It becomes an opportunity to make decisions for someone we love, and reaching inside of them and trying to express their feelings, what they would have wanted to do in these circumstances. And we don't always know. So the most important criteria in my heart is to let our loved ones know, if we can, how we want to die, if we want to do treatment at all costs, when is it okay to die, when is it not, How do you want to be treated? These are tough conversations that aren't necessarily supported in our families to have them. So you can do your advance directives, and then I have a document I've been working on where you attach what I call love letters. And you let your family know, you let your loved one know, you let your doctor know what your wishes are. And that's one of the ways we can ease the burden on our loved ones. It's truly one of the final gifts we give them, besides taking care of our material life, which is also a gift to do that. My sister did not, so that it ended up being very difficult. She was only 49 when she died, and she wasn't able to do those documents because of her fear. Even though we had conversations, and I'm so grateful for those, that helped me, but she hadn't done any of her end of life paperwork. And it's a lot of hard work when those documents aren't in place in a litigious society as what we have. And they're easy to do and really difficult to do. Easy to do with filling them out, but difficult to get into that psychological space to do them. But I really encourage you to continue those conversations, to get those documents in place. And that really helps with the ethical dilemmas that sometimes come up at the end of life. And just a reminder, an ethical dilemma is not black and white. An ethical dilemma, there isn't a right and wrong. And that's what makes it difficult for the ego mind that likes things neat. Yes and no, and this is guaranteed. And that's another reason why death is a bit scary, because it isn't the great unknown, the great mystery, if you will. Yeah. Great, Susan. I'm glad that was helpful. Yeah. And any thoughts on these ethical dilemma we've been talking about, and the end of life paperwork? I see my wonderful assistant put up our resource page on the website. So there's lots of good resources on there and articles that talk about some of the subjects we're talking about. So feel free to sign on there and get any additional information. And you're welcome to join any of the other programs that we have too, many community events. Good. What else is flowing through you tonight? It's a big conundrum, the ethical decisions, and one we just can't solve. As an end-of-life practitioner, my role with the family is to support them, is to find resources, is to help them process their emotions, to find their way to a decision that feels comfortable to them without leading or directing. That's really, really key. Often we think that we have to solve this or fix something. Nothing's broken. Truly, truly isn't. Susan shares, I've had several deaths in my family that has caused me to contemplate my own death. The idea of death is intimidating because it's permanent and not knowing what happens next. I think I have a death plan that might help me accept it and to do more in my life, so I have a feeling of satiation at the end of life feeling full. Beautiful, Susan. I think that's a great path for all of us working through the intimidation of death. And you're spot on in my heart why it isn't intimidating. It's kind of interesting, though, Susan, that in other cultures, death isn't intimidating and even welcomed. Death is even welcomed. One other reason is many cultures have an in-depth mythology, living myth practice of embracing death during life. You probably are aware of the Tibetan Buddhist and the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I highly recommend the Tibetan Book of Living and Dead by Sogyal Rinpoche. It's also on our website and resources, I believe, book, because it really is the texts, the scriptures, the ancient texts that teach the Tibetans how to live and how to die when their time comes. Many practice meditation as a form of experiencing death, because what is it to go into meditation, to leave the state of consciousness that you and I are in, to head into another state of consciousness? Some experience that as a death, just like going to sleep at night. When you wake up in the morning, you don't necessarily remember the time you were in, do you? Or the space. Sometimes we have dreams that help us. But death is experienced outside of time and space. Now, in Western culture and Western religions, there's not a lot of practices to embrace death, to visualize an afterlife, to have those conversations. Christianity, the soul leaves the body. In Judaism, you go back ashes to ashes. But many other religions and cultures have an elaborate system of where the soul goes. Kind of in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there's these bardos experiences of meeting and working through karma. So having the conversation, studying, reading, understanding what other cultures believe to help us formulate our imaginations, our visions, and comfort. And it's a lot of faith. Those that have faith of an afterlife often feel safer with death. And you said one other thing, Susan, that really, really touches me, and that you want to do more in your life, live your life more fully, because that's what death does. It inspires our life. We have an end destination for this life. I'm going to open up to not knowing where the next life is, or for those that believe in reincarnation, or those believe there is no afterlife. But we have this now, and we have the opportunity to make the most out of this life. Like I said at the beginning, death and having the conversations around death start to let go of those experiences in our life that don't bring meaning. Certain things just aren't as important anymore, especially after you hold a loved one in death. They're gone. It's almost unfathomable. Yeah, we can feel them in our heart and carrying them forth in our heart. But life ends as we know it. And if we're making the most out of this lifetime, if we're doing our best human experience, and I do want to put a caveat on there, it's never going to be a perfect life. We have another myth besides anti-aging flowing through us in America, and that is the myth of perfection. And it is a myth from that standpoint. There's no such thing. We want to make the most out of this human experience. That means brushing our knee and scraping our knees and falling and picking ourselves up and learning and growing and laughing and crying and living. That's all what this experience is. And most precious is learning to love more. And that's what death teaches us. Especially if we're willing to face those things that bring fear. Every time we clear the fear gnome out of our way, we open our heart fuller. We open our heart fuller to love, to life, and to those experiences around. I sure wish that for all of you, and I wish that for all my clients, because that's what it's about. Even when we're dying, how do we want to live until we die? How do we want to live to the fullest until we die? Susan, you also mentioned a death plan, and it's really helpful. There's several documents. Thank you, Maria. There's several documents out there that help us create death plans. You can also work with an end-of-life practitioner or a doula. Sometimes they're very well versed on creating death plans. But most important, you don't need anybody else, is to reach into your heart and write what moves through you. Doesn't have to be perfect, can have grammar and spelling mistakes. But write down what's important to you. Write how you want to be treated at the end of life. Do you want to be as conscious as you can, or you want to be out of pain and take medication? Sometimes that's a tricky balance. There are no rules here. It's about you making the most out of your life, how you want to be cared for. It's part of the reason that has inspired me to do this work. I have a heart pain for people that die alone. It's kind of ironic because we all end up dying alone. But mostly what I'm trying to say is I want people to feel loved at the end of their life. Isn't love like a healing balm for many of those spaces and places in us that hurt? You know, I could be having a tough day for a number of reasons, and my puppy comes and gives me a kiss, or my husband looks me in my eyes and let me know it's going to be okay. Isn't it amazing how the suffering kind of melts away? That is so true at the end of life. Holding someone's hand, crawling in bed with them, letting them know they're loved. Isn't that one of the greatest inspirations of this life? Being loved, finding love, giving love. It's no different at the end of life. And if you get a chance to read The Death of Ivan Ilyak, you'll see that. It's beautifully displayed. It's a very short book, by the way, not like War and Peace. It's less than 100 pages, but it's rich and deep. So we have that opportunity, and a death plan helps us set up to be as loved as possible. And I wish that for all beings. No matter how our death is, we don't have control of that often. We have some control as we take care of ourselves in this life, this body, and try and nurture it. We can eliminate as many chronic diseases as possible, but we have accidents that we can't control. That's why it's so important to prepare for death today and every day. We just don't know what's going to happen. We just don't know what's going to happen. I might not make the next Death Cafe. And I would want you all to know that you're loved. I would want you to know that I dedicate this work to all of you. So that if something happens to me, that might be a memory that touches your heart. That might be a memory that inspires your life. Yeah. So see, it's really not about death. It is and it isn't. It's really about life, how we want to live. And there's lots of questions about dying, you know. And I absolutely love it because it gives us more and more and more opportunity to create the environment around the end of life for ourselves and our loved ones that we so deserve. And the medical model of death has changed so much. It didn't used to be like this. You know, when I started doing this work in my 20s, I'm in my 60s now, it was different. We didn't have a monetization of end of life. It was really more holistic once hospice came to the United States. Hospice was founded by Cicely Saunders in England in the early 50s. It came to the United States, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was one of the pioneering women that brought hospice to the United States and brought it into the current medical system. And when I worked for hospice as a volunteer and then a social worker for many years, it was before the monetization of end-of-life care. It was before the insurance companies came in and guided the directives of how hospice operates with people at the end of life. So it moved a little bit away from a patient-centered practice to a financial model. Now, please don't get me wrong. Hospice provides superior support. They provide a medicalized support. They have social workers, they have chaplains, and they offer that support. but they're mandated still by insurance companies, which isn't a bad thing because it helps us all. Hospice services are free to those with insurance. But what's missing is the individual needs. They're very different. The time and the space to support somebody creating a death plan, for example, that's not covered by Medicare or insurances. Or to sit down and do a Zoom call with a family to navigate ethical dilemmas at the end of life. I could go on, but those are some examples of it. So I love the expansion we're having currently with other end-of-life practitioners supporting people at the end of life so that people can make the choices they wish and they can make informed decisions. You know, it's very scary signing on to a hospice. It's probably one of the most special sessions I have is interviewing hospices with my families, as well as helping them navigate what hospice is and what hospice isn't. It's kind of interesting. The same question comes up now about hospice that came up 30 years ago. And that one of those questions are, does hospice provide continuous care? And the answer is no. They have home visits. A nurse will come, a chaplain will come, a social worker will come, a health aide to do help with bathing will come intermittently, sometimes daily, sometimes every other week, sometimes a few times a week. They mold it towards the needs as well as the guidelines. Okay. But what if you have two elderly and one of them is dying and the other 80 or 90-year-old can't take care of their loved ones and they don't have the financial means to bring in 24-hour care, which is very, very expensive? Families need to know that up front, and then a plan can be put in place to bring care for those loved ones. And we need some time and some understanding to draw in resources from the community and loved ones. So there's still some misunderstanding of what care it provides and what it doesn't. So I'm really excited as we're stepping into an integrative model of care. Hospices are starting to interact with end-of-life practitioners. Some are bringing them on staff, some are referring. I'm working with 3 hospices now that I've built a beautiful relationship and actually feel like an extension of the team. And that's just perfect because you know who wins? Our families. Our families get the utmost of care. Yeah, very beautiful. Thank you, Annie. Thank you for the feedback. Those are so sweet. Susan says, I think it's very important to make someone who's dying know they're loved. Absolutely. And I wish everyone to know they're loved. What happens if everyone knew they were loved? What would happen to this world? Oh my goodness. I think we'd have more joy. I think we'd find more peace for sure. Yeah, I love it. So I want to check in. We've just got about a little bit under 10 minutes now left. So I want to check in if there's anything else you're dying to say. I love saying that. Anything else on your mind? Any reflections from what we shared tonight, or anything you've been holding on to that you wanted to ask and or share? I am so happy to have that conversation, and I appreciate your comments back and forth. It really helps us deepen this experience together. It is kind of fun. I can't see you, but by listening to your words and reading your words, there is a sensation of connecting. So let me know if there's anything else on your mind. I did come up with something that was on my mind from our conversation. Let me answer, Lynn, your question first, because my questions can always wait. Is the Death Cafe a non-for-profit organization, and how does one get more information about it? The Death Cafe is a nonprofit organization. You can dial into deathcafe.com and you can read their website, and it lists cafes all over the world. You also can do a Google search on Death Cafe. I think we have a little bit more information on our website too. You're happy to check out. Do you have a specific question about Death Cafe besides if it's nonprofit? One of their bylaws, sure, Lynn, one of their bylaws is that all death cafes are a not-for-profit, that their guideline is to not charge for death cafes. And I believe most people do death cafes. And Lynn, the Death Cafe .com site is the perfect place to check if there's any in your area. You can put in your area, your zip code, and it'll pop up the death cafes in your area. So, oh, there's something else I wanted to say about Death Cafe. Before COVID, I did live in-person death cafes, and that was a lot of fun. Like I said, I always serve chocolate because I want to do death by chocolate. How about you? And I always serve tea. And it was really lovely to be together in a circle. So since COVID, they've gone all online, and it's another special way of doing the cafe because the outreach is so much farther. I do have, by the way, and you're welcome to join us, a Zoom Death Cafe once a month. It's the last Monday of the month. The link to sign up is on our website, and then we can see each other. And there's a dozen to 20 people that go on there, and it's lovely because it's almost like being in the room, as you know. So you're welcome to check all that out. And in 10 years, no Death Cafe has ever been the same. Each of the cafes are different, even if we're talking about the same thing. So it's something I continue to be in awe in. Maria was an 11th hour volunteer before COVID. It was the greatest gift and taught me so much. I miss it terribly. Yes, it is. Doesn't it teach us about life, Maria? It does. And of course about death. The other thing I think that makes it so magical, and I haven't said this yet, but I'd love to share it if I could, is that being with people that are dying and their family often creates a really intimate environment, an intimacy that we don't experience in other places in our life. I've asked myself over the years, why? Why is it so intimate? And why do I not feel this any place in life? In our dying process, our body is changing, of course, but so is our mind and so is our spirit. And one of the things that happens is we start to leave this existence as we die. The veil gets thinner between the layers of consciousness. It's very hard to hold those masks up that we've done all our life. Like, I'm an end-of-life practitioner, I'm a mother, I'm a teacher, I'm a student, I'm a friend, I'm a mother. We have these roles and sometimes a mask of who we are that we keep separately. Sometimes we intermingle them. As we get closer to the end of life, those masks, those separations start to melt away. If you can put an image of an hourglass together, and we have the hourglass filled, or let me make it a sphere, if you will. And there's two spheres, one on top of each other. And we mostly live in this sphere, which is our consciousness, our ego consciousness, our mind, the everyday tasks we do, the cooking, the cleaning, the working, the hiking, the swimming, whatever we're doing. That's in this type of consciousness, which I'm going to call for a moment the ego consciousness. We have another consciousness, which is our soul consciousness. We have another consciousness where the divine hangs out, where our numinosity is, where the experience of love is, or when you watch that film or hear a story or read a poem and you burst out in tears, that is often spoken to as the soul. And when we're in wakeful consciousness, the ego controls us, the ego guides us. Towards the end of life, the spheres shift, and we spend more time in the heart, more time in the soul, and less time in this ego consciousness. And there's something about touching, feeling, sharing conversations in the heart and soul. It's so intimate. And the vulnerability that we have at the end of life brings a unique intimacy. And that's what makes it so blessed in my experience. So one of my goals in life is to bring that experience into everyday living. Bring my soul, bring my heart into everyday living. It won't be the same because we only die once. We have near-death experiences, so there's more than one. But it's a beautiful, beautiful intention to have in life. Many of the great philosophers, religious leaders, biblical texts speak to the soul and the soul's journey. The soul's where our intuition is. The soul often can be the guide. So I'm getting a message of I Loving Death by Chocolate. Wonderful. And Maria shares love and forgiveness. That's the name of the game. Yes. And at the end of life, that portal is open. And there's such a healing opportunity for forgiveness. And again, forgive every day and love every day. We are winding down in our last couple minutes. So I just want to check in to see if there's anything else that's moving through you that you might want to share. Oh, I want to thank you so much for being here this evening. It's always a delightful experience for me. I appreciate you spending the time and sharing your hearts because I learn and grow from you as well. I want to close with a little poem, if I might, for you. Thank you, Maria, so much and such. This is my experience of end of life as well. I also believe, so this is just personal, that when there's an ending, there's a beginning. So when I'm thinking of ending and beginnings, I'm also thinking of birth, ending a job, or coming out of COVID. These are all endings and beginnings, and we have many of them. So I'd like to share this. Thank you all. You're so sweet. I really appreciate your feedback and your time. If it feels right, close your eyes. Sometimes it bathes over us in a different way. Endings and beginnings feel ever so bittersweet. May we evolve from what was. May all find hope for what can be. May forgiveness burst through your hearts. And may you find faith in your dreams. Love will always endure. With love from my heart to your heart. Please take the bestest care of you. We're all transitioning in this life right now across the world as we experience what it's like now in this COVID world and moving past. So be safe, be love, and be you. I'll look forward to seeing you next month. Please don't hesitate to check in if there's anything that got inspired from tonight, anything you want to share. Check out our programs. Love to see you again. And please, please be well.